Let's begin by creating a new project for week 2. So I'm going to go to the File menu and select New Project. And then under Project Name, I'm going to type Week 2. So this is going inside of my CIS 195P folder in htdocs. And then for Project Type, I'm going to select PHP Empty Project and say OK. Now, since PHPStorm knows this is a PHP project, it knows that we need a PHP interpreter. And last week we manually set the PHP interpreter for our week 1 project by going to the File Settings menu. This time, since we selected a PHP empty project, it's prompting us to enter the interpreter. But if we click on this drop-down, we see the PHP interpreter we configured last week, and so we select that and say OK. Now, I'm going to open this in the same window as my week 1. So this is going to replace my week 1 project with my week 2 project. So here's my new week 2 project. Now, if you don't like having to set the interpreter every time you create a new project, you can go to the File menu and go to Default Settings, and then under Languages and Frameworks, PHP, click this drop-down and select PHP 5.6.12. So this is just like what we did last week for week 1, except last week we just changed the settings, and this week we're changing the default settings so that any new projects get this automatically. So we'll go ahead and click OK, and from now on, if we create a new project, it should automatically set the interpreter to our PHP 5.6.2 interpreter, or 12 interpreter. Now I'm going to right-click on the week 2 folder and select New PHP File, and I'm just going to call this testme.php. And I'm going to add one line of PHP code. Like so. And then I want to try to run it. So I'm going to go to the Run menu and select Run. Now you'll notice that I have two options here. Testme.php, I can either run it inside of PHPStorm in a console window, and that's what this one looks like, or I can run it in my configured browser, which is Chrome. That's what this one looks like. So I'm going to run it in Chrome by clicking on that, and Chrome pops up. It opens my page. Now, there's something interesting going on here. So if you watch the web architecture video, you'll see that when you load a page from the browser like so, I'm going to go CIS 195, whoops, I'm going to go localhost CIS 195p week 1, week 2, testme.php. So you'll notice the path here, localhost. So this is the computer I'm running on, but then I haven't specified a port. So by default it's using port 80, and port 80 is where XAMPP is running. So I'm talking to the Apache web server that's built into XAMPP, and so I have to specify the path under htdocs, which is CIS 195p, week 2, testme.php. So I'm loading this page from the Apache web server that's part of XAMPP. But if you look at this version that I got from running it in PHPStorm, you'll see it's talking to port 63342 on localhost. So this is a separate Apache web server that's built into PHPStorm. So we're actually talking directly to a separate running instance of the web server that's part of PHPStorm, and PHPStorm knows that we're currently working on the week 2 project. So instead of having to specify CIS 195p here under htdocs, I'm talking directly to the week 2 local web server in PHPStorm. So that's why the paths don't match. So no CIS 195p because I'm talking to the project level web server in PHPStorm, versus I do have to specify CIS 195p because I'm talking to the Apache web server that's built into XAMPP. So if you were wondering about that, that's why the paths are different. So either way, I can go back to my PHPStorm and I can enable debugging. So 2 steps to enable debugging. First, I want to put a breakpoint on the line that I want to break at. And second of all, I want to tell PHPStorm to listen for connections from PHP. So I'm going to click on this little phone icon. It's got a red circle next to it. And then I get the sound lines coming out of it in green. This means that PHPStorm is waiting for a connection from the PHP debugger, and it doesn't really care who makes that connection. So I'm going to go back to my browser, and you'll notice I'm just talking to the web server that's built into XAMPP right now. I'm going to hit reload, and I get this pop-up, incoming connection from Xdebug. So the first time you try to connect to PHPStorm from a web server, it's going to launch this dialog here, and it's asking me what to do with this URL. So I'm trying to access CIS 195p week2 testme.php on Apache and XAMPP, and it needs to know how to map that to a project file. And it's suggesting this is the one that I think it's talking to. And it's correct, so I'm going to say accept. So now execution stops at the line where I put the breakpoint. I have my debugger pane where I can see local variables and the stack. And then I'm going to hit resume program execution. The page finishes loading. And if I go back to Chrome, it's showing the correct contents. Now, if I go back to the browser page that's talking to the web server in PHPStorm, and I hit reload, it's asking about this incoming connection now because it's got a different request URL and it still has to map it to this particular page. So once again, I'm going to take the accept. PHPStorm knows that I'm at this breakpoint. I continue, go back to Chrome, and you'll see the page is loaded correctly here as well. So this means everything's working correctly. If you run into problems, go ahead and post them to the discussion board.